Hi, my name is Anthony Stauffer, and I'm going to teach you how to play a really simple blues solo today. For those of you that are going to look at this and kind of laugh at the simplicity, just try and remember, where you were when you started out, because this is really aimed at the beginning guitar player. The style is influenced a lot by Stevie Ray Vaughan, and one of the things that goes along with that is that I'm tuned down a half a step on all strings. So I'm going to go through all the notes and play them individually so that you can kind of tune your guitar to mine before we start. The other thing is that when you get through the simple version, you know that pretty well. I have two other versions of this lesson, intermediate and advanced, and you can kind of work your way up the chain. But for now, we're going to look at the beginner version of this 12-bar slow blues solo. Things you need to know before we get into the details of this lesson. The first one is that I'm tuned down to what's called E-flat tuning, or half step down tuning. That means that all my strings are down a half a step from where they're normally tuned for guitar playing. Now I know that probably sounds strange, but most of the lessons I teach have to do with the style of Stevie Ray Vaughan, and that's how he tuned his guitar, and most of what I learned was from him, so that's kind of how I do it. So I'm actually going to go through each of the strings and play them individually so that you can tune your guitar to mine. The other thing that you need to know is that this really is a simple lesson. Like, there's not much that's very complicated about it. So if the things in this lesson look really easy to you, then this might not be the right lesson for you. I'm going to play through all of my open strings here so that you can make sure that your guitar is tuned the same as mine. Now I'm tuned down half a step on each string. So you might need to go through this a couple times to get yours just right. So let's start with the low E string. Here. Part 1 just sounds like this. And if you've watched my lessons on blues boxes, you'll notice from the graphic on the screen that we're inside of box 1 when we start. And we're going to be transitioning up to box 2 with this first part. So the notes that you play are right here. And then you can slide up here to this note. Now part 2, there's a couple different ways you can play it. If you're adventurous and you don't mind kind of getting your fingers hurting a little bit, you can play it. Now if that bend right here, what you're doing is you're putting your finger right here and you're bending up a whole step. And that can take a lot of hand strength, and it can also do a lot of wear on your fingertips. You can actually see the string indentation on mine there. Now part 3, at first glance, sounds very similar to part 2, but with one slight difference. Part 3 goes... So what's different is in part 2 we just went, and in part 3 the length of this note is a lot shorter. And that's something that you'll use a lot more as you start building up familiarity with some of these Albert King style riffs. Part 4 is a little bit more complicated and it has some more notes, but I'm going to walk through it very slowly. Part 4 sounds like this. Now, where we're starting is just like in part 1. If you want, you can give this a little bend. Now you're going to give this a little bend up and down. So that's part 4. And then soon after part 4, part 5 comes in. So the notes of part 5 start right here on the root note in box 1. Alright, so let's go on to part 6 here. Part 6 starts in just like part 1. Except this time we go. And then we drop down to this note. Alright, so part 6 goes. And then that takes us right into part 7, which goes just 2 notes. Trick is, when you get up to here, you want to maybe can bend a little bit with your finger. That might hurt your fingertips a little bit, but it's something that kind of builds up endurance there. Let's see here. Now that takes us to part 8, which is very much like part 1 and parts 2 and 3. So that's just the same as part 2 there. But the way that we end the whole solo is with part 9 here, which just goes. And that's a real kind of Albert King style thing there. So the notes that you're going to play for part 9 are. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk through the whole 12-bar sequence, the whole solo sequence, and I'm going to call out each of the parts as I play them. And I'm going to play it in time with the backing track again. That was part 1. Now part 2. Now part 3. Now part 4. And part 5. Now part 6. Part 7. And part 8. And 9. So let's go over in more detail each of the 9 parts of this solo, and I'll try and explain them a little bit better so that if you're really new to blues music or even to playing guitar at all, that you can follow a little bit better what I'm doing. First thing that I want to talk about is where my hands are. Now I'm in the key of A flat, and I'm in what I call box 1, and I taught a series over the past couple of weeks called the 5 blues boxes for guitar, and you're going to want to review at least box 1 and box 2 for this lesson, and because that's kind of what you're doing when you're in the solo. So the first thing to know is that you're in the middle of box 1, and the first riff, the important thing there is that you're transitioning from box 1 to box 2, which is a big part about learning to play good blues soloing. So let's talk about picking here. I'm doing a down pick on each of these notes. And if you're not used to kind of sliding, it's just one of those things where you got to press not quite as hard as you do for a regular note, but just enough to allow yourself to slide over the frets. And what happens here is we're sliding from box 1 right up into box 2, and the note that we hit ends up being the root note of the key that we're playing in. Now, one little trick that you can do as you start to get more familiar with guitar is actually bend this note. And that's probably going to be difficult to do cleanly at first, but in the intermediate lesson I talk more about how to do that without letting it go. Or like letting it ring out a whole bunch of extra noise. So that's just one little extra thing that you can do there. Now for part 2, where you're doing the bending, that bending will probably hurt your fingers if you're not used to doing a whole lot of bending yet. But you really want to work at it. And like I said, you can kind of cheat by going up a half step here and starting to bend. But keep in mind that your goal should be to be able to bend a full step from this note. Let me think here. And then when you get to the bottom here, you want to get to the point where you can put vibrato on this note. But that vibrato technique is a little bit difficult to master, so if you can't do it for now, just focus on the notes that you're playing. And then of course part 3 is very much like that, except a little bit faster. Let's see. Part 4 is I've outlined it as being very simple here. But the exciting thing is that what you're learning when you learn this series of notes, you're learning the foundation for a lot of other Stevie Ray Vaughan style licks, like things that are a lot faster than what I'm teaching here, but these notes are at the very core of it. So I know that might be a little bit challenging if you're not used to playing notes that quickly, but once you get familiar with the positions, you can kind of see that if you've got the right grip here, like I call this kind of the baseball bat grip, it's you're not actually doing very much moving of your hands. Now it's a little bit odd to kind of get into this position with a guitar, but that's one of the things that I taught back in a lesson called The Grip that really helps your playing out. Again, for part 4, if you can, you may want to try and give a little bend here, because that's really the way that the lick is supposed to be played. I just know that bend can be hard to do cleanly, so I'm not making a big deal about it here. And then part 5 is kind of like an answer to part 4. It's on the bottom end of the box. And this little note here, you know, I don't draw that as part of the outline of box 5, because box 1. But this note right here in particular is one that's played a lot in some faster riffs. But for now, I just included it in this walk down so that you can be, used to kind of hitting it with your middle finger here. So you just kind of got to start with your ring finger. And then if you want to get used to hitting that with your pinky, or you can reach up with this finger. Now as you get more advanced and you get more used to this baseball bat grip, you can actually use your thumb to hit that last note. And the nice thing is that if you drape your thumb over like that, the tip of it mutes this string right here, and sometimes this one, so you can actually hit that really hard, and you get a little raking effect of the other strings without letting them ring out. Alright, so let's move on to part 6, and in part 6 it's very much like part 4. The only thing different is you're hanging on this note until you drop to that one, so there's not too much different with that. And then part 7, again, you can put a little bit of a twist on this, like I said before, and that kind of tears at your fingertips a little bit, but it helps give you a little bit more vocal sound to it. And then closing it out, you have part 8. And that's pretty much like part 2, but then what comes at the very end in part 9, that's very important because it ties in with a real common, what's called a turnaround at the end of the sequence, which is what the rhythm guitarist or the bass player may be doing. It's a complementary note to the 5 chord that you end up on. So I just mentioned that to let you know that the note that you're ending on here, this is used for songs that actually have that turnaround at the end of the 12-bar sequence. Now the way Albert King would use this is when he would end something like that, it would be like as he launches into the next one. So it's a way to end the sequence without leaving the box that you're in. Well, that does it for this simple 12-bar slow blues solo. I hope that you were able to kind of pick out everything and understand the terms that I'm talking about. If not, just post a comment over at steviesnacks.com on this lesson page and I'll do my best to answer it. Or send me an email, and that contact information is on the site. So, as you go through this solo and you become more familiar with it, move on up to the intermediate and then hopefully advanced versions as you get better and better. And I think you'll find that the concepts that I've taught in even this simple version will transfer very nicely as you move up in difficulty. So until that time, I hope this lesson serves you well, and I'll see you next time.